Welcome to episode 161 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer director J.J. Abrams as well as his greater Bad Robot universe. I'm your host for this time around. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host Matt Crandall, and on today's edition of the show, we will be checking out the 1996 film entitled The Pallbearer, co-written and directed by the one and only Matt Reeves. So, Matt, I have a question for you. So, they say he really did it. Why do you think he really did it? Do you think he did it for a girl?
We may never know what was going through the mind of Bill Abernathy. And this movie, on paper and in execution, like this is a dream team when you look at this lineup. So, remember 1996. Friends is the hottest fucking TV show in the universe. And as the lead in this movie is David Schwimmer, Ross Geller from Friends, playing Tom Thompson, this struggling 25-year-old dude who is kind of aimless. He's got a gap in his resume that becomes a problem in the very beginning. And he's like, don't worry about this last year. He's living at home with his mom and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And the main thrust of this is this whole suicide, mistaken identity kind of mix up. But also we have the return of his dream girl, Julie DeMarco, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, who in this moment, back in 1996, was steadily on the rise. This is right after Seven. This is when she's going out with Brad Pitt. It's when she is one of the hottest up-and-coming young actresses in the world. And then we've got J.J. Abrams still being billed as Jeffrey Abrams as the producer of this movie. A movie that is written by his good friend Matt Reeves, co-written by Jason Katims. Super TV producer, Friday Night Lights, Parenthood, so many good things he would go on to do. And this is where it started. And he's working with his pals J.J. and Matt. And you're like, holy shit. Jason Katims, Matt Reeves, and J.J. Abrams are all working together. And as the credits start, I'm like just doing the DiCaprio point, because this movie is shot by Robert Elswit, who would go on to be a great cinematographer. He would do Michael Clayton and one of my favorite movies of all time, Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. And I'm like, they got that guy to shoot this movie? And then it says, edited by Stan Salfas, who anybody who's been following us on this Bad Robot thing, Stan worked on Felicity. He directed an episode of Felicity. He was a producer on Felicity. We just wrapped What About Brian, and he was one of the guys still working with Bad Robot on What About Brian, and he edited this movie. And so all of this is happening, and then the movie starts, and it is this very earnest, like an honest, emotional sort of story where this guy finds himself struggling in life, and he's not sure what his purpose is or where to go, and he's thrown into this really weird situation because he gets a phone call that this guy, Bill Abernathy, has killed himself. And his mom is like, Tom, I need you. I need you to be a pallbearer because you were one of his closest friends. And Tom hangs up the phone and he's like, who the fuck? And so I love that the concept of this movie is basically, he gets roped into this situation and it's too hard for him to tell this grieving mom, like, I didn't know your son. I don't know him. I don't remember him. And so that's the crux, as well as in a very Felicity way, this dream girl comes back and like he goes like full, like obsessed, almost stalker mode to try and impress Julie DeMarco. And I love that we've got like a group of friends that he bounces ideas off of. And the group of friends is Michael Rappaport, who's one of the great New York actors, very outspoken dude now, but like a staple. And the other one, up and coming actor Michael Vartan, who would go on to star in Bad Robot's sensational TV show Alias as Vaughn. So, Marcelo, what are you thinking as this movie starts and it's already a J.J. Matt Reeves joint, and then fucking Vaughn from Alias shows up as the best friend?
This movie is out of control. I mean, the fact that we have so many behind the scenes Bad Robot people, and the fact that we have so many talented people behind this movie, so many talented people that will go on to bigger and better things, like Matt said. The guy who co-wrote this movie wrote Friday Night Lights and Parenthood, for God's sakes. Come on, you can't get any better than that. But I really love this movie because I really connected with it, because I am that guy who would take a phone call from an absolute stranger, and if I, if I was invited to be a pallbearer at a funeral, I wouldn't want to hurt the stranger's feelings. So I like Tom would go through with it to a point, because I thought there were several instances in this movie where Tom just needed to say something. But if he said something, the movie would be over. But like Matt said, I love that Tom lives at home with his mother, and he's a 25-year-old man, but he still has this childish way about him. And I love the fact that his mother, throughout the course of the movie, just gets in on everything. Like he could be doing something in his room and his mother walk right in. When he takes phone calls from different people at his house, his mother will, take another phone in the house and jump on the call with him, and asking the most embarrassing questions ever. I am not the biggest a fan of Friends, but I thought that this actor, whose name is escaping me at the moment, did such a good job with this character, because I connected with it so much, because at a point in my life, that was me. I wanted to sort of break free, but I needed somebody like Julie, or I needed somebody like Felicity to break me out of it, to make me brave enough to do that. And unfortunately, nobody came until later on until later on in my life. So for that reason and so many more, I really adored this movie from start to finish.
You nailed it. The overall arc for Tom in this movie is about breaking free of being stuck, and kind of stuck in this in between being a real adult and being a kid. And not like a kid who, is helpless or anything, but it is a thing where, his mom is overbearing, but also we don't feel that he's actually adult enough that he should move out when the movie starts and do his own thing. And I just love that, like, the whole arc of this movie is about him realizing this. And not to jump ahead, but the final line of the movie is him saying, "I'm ready." And he's talking about a moving van, but he's talking about, like, now he's actually ready for the real world. He's actually ready to grow up and be a person and take accountability for his actions, which is something that he does not do throughout a lot of this movie, because he's got to get to a certain place. But I love Carol Kane, who's his mom. She brings such a funny energy. And in the first 10 minutes, she goes to walk into his room, and he has put a deadbolt lock on the door. And she goes, "What's this friggin' lock?" And so we know that, like, his nosy mom, he has added this lock because he is sick and tired of her just waltzing in because it's new. And she's like, "What's this friggin' lock?" And he's like, "I just need some time." And you're like, yeah, well, he's a grown man, so I can understand why he needs some time alone. And he gets that important phone call, and so he goes to then talk to the buddies. And at first, like, Michael Rappaport is kind of playing a little bit of a pushover, because in the first 20 minutes, we find out that he is engaged to his fiancée, Lauren, and his friends fucking hate Lauren. They think she is the most annoying hanger-on. They call her an albatross later. And, I think we can all, I don't know if everybody can relate, but I can relate, where you have, like, a friend who is going out with somebody and they're, like, over the moon for them. And you're like, you do know this person is a complete asshole, right? Like, this person is a piece of shit. And it becomes awkward if that relationship goes to the next phase and you're like, ugh, like, there goes hanging out because I can't stand to be around this person's significant other. And I like that that's kind of a weird dynamic that they're trying to deal with. And then we've got Michael Vartan's Scott, who shows up wearing a Brooks Brothers suit. And Schwimmer is like, "What are you doing? Why are you wearing this fancy, expensive suit, Brooks Brothers?" Like, and he's the guy who's trying to move on to the next phase. And it's, Schwimmer's just sitting there in a hoodie and a, shirt that some guy would wear to 5th grade. And you can see the different stages that these guys are at. Rappaport's like the codependent, and he's depending on the wrong person. Vartan is trying to be the adult, but as we see as the movie goes on, he's kind of a shitty guy. And then there's Schwimmer, who's still trying to figure it out. And I love when he's like, yeah, she called me. I got roped into being a pallbearer. And Rappaport's like, it's a scam. This is some sort of scam. You're going to end up dead in a ditch. Don't do it. And I thought that was hilarious. And he's trying to see if he can borrow Scott's suit. And Scott's like, no, I don't want to lend you my suit. This is my good suit. And then we see that Scott is married to Toni Collette, who, was also an up-and-comer who's now like an incredible Academy Award nominated actress. And when he's at the party, this just kind of sums up his character. He walks in and Toni Collette's like, oh my God, is that what you're wearing? And Schwimmer's Tom Thompson, which most people won't recognize that name, but any Canadian kid, we study the group of 7 who are like the most famous Canadian painters. And Tom Thompson is a member of this like group that every Canadian kid in elementary school studies the group of 7. So every time they said Tom Thompson, I'm just like, okay, they should have switched the name, but it sounds good. But she says, is that what you're wearing? And he goes, no, I thought I would show up to your party wearing clothes that I didn't intend to wear to your party. And it's like a very Ross Geller moment. And she's like, okay, well, I wish you had worn something else. And he's like, why? And she's like, well, and then he looks and Gwyneth walks through the door. Julie DeMarco, the girl that he had been in love with in high school, who could not have given a shit less about him. So he panics and he goes and he has to get a new shirt and he changes. And then they're having this conversation and they're hitting it off. And she's like, oh yeah, man, I remember you. And he's like, you remember me? And she's like, yeah, you were so great in the school plays and a great voice. And like, a lot of girls were after you in high school. And the look on his face when he's like, nope, a lot of girls were after me? Nope, wrong guy. And she's imagining someone else. And this is like one of the most mortifying moments that could ever happen to a person. So it's super relatable, even though Schwimmer's character will do a lot of shit that is kind of despicable as this movie goes on. But this moment is where we do get endeared to him because I hate to say it, I have run into people from high school that are like, Matt, great to see you. And I'm like, I have no fucking idea who this is. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, great. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't fucking know who this is. And some people, it's just because they look so different. And then if you can, in the conversation, you can suss out their name. But like one time a few years ago, the person was like, it's whoever. And I'm like, yeah. And we had like a 10-minute talk and they left. And I was like, I literally don't remember them. And you do go home and you grab the yearbook and you flip through it. And I'm like, in this case, Bill's picture is not in the yearbook. So Schwimmer can't remember this guy from high school. And Julie also doesn't remember him from high school. So how are you feeling at this party where we get this, manic pixie dream girl who has come back into his life? And there's also some mistaken identity on her part. And, still he doesn't know who the hell Bill is.
I absolutely love that because, like I said in my opening comments, I identify with David Schwimmer's character so much because, in a sense, David Schwimmer was me, a couple years ago or 3 years ago. And the thing that I identify with the most is when he enters the party, that one individual says, is that what you're wearing? And, and Tom says, of course, that's what I'm wearing. And I cannot tell you guys how many times I've been to family functions and my family knows how I dress. I basically dress like a second year college student in the 90s. That's how I dress. And it's always the same thing. And without fail, there's always one family member that either gives me shit on what I'm wearing, whether I'm shaved or my long hair. And I was like, every fucking time I'm mortified. I'm like, just stop it. You know how I dress. You know how I am. Just leave me the fuck alone. So watching Tom go through that in this fictitious movie gave me so many feels. But like you, Matt, a couple years ago, I went to a high school reunion and this guy came up to me and he said, hey, such and such, how you doing? And like you, Matt, I sat there for like 10, maybe it was 10 to 25 minutes talking to this guy about a TV show that was out at the time. And for the life of me, I don't know how I got through this conversation, but I was able to get through it. When he walked away, I was like, who the fuck is that guy? And when I got home, I did exactly what you said. I went through the yearbook and I went, holy shit, that's this guy from yearbook. And I'm like, oh, that guy. Yeah, look, I found this moment extremely relatable, especially when Julie came in. And Tom went up to talk to her and tried to reconnect with her, and she basically said, "I don't know you. I have no idea who you are. I think you're from this place, but it turns out you're not from this place." That has happened to me multiple times, and I could not feel more at home with this movie and more in tune with Tom. I do agree with you that as the movie goes on, he does engage in some Felicity behavior. I mean, there's a couple instances in this movie where I'm like, dude, if you did that today, you get arrested.
There's a moment where he even, not to jump ahead, but there's a moment where he grabs Julie by the arm to stop her from leaving somewhere. And I was like, you can't lay hands on somebody like that. And it's like a violent, like he's grabbing her to stop her. And I'm like, oh shit, you can't do that now either. But what I like is that this movie, it has a lot of influences, but a lot of that emotionality, that high school to college transition that all of these guys would dwell in later in their career. So, you know, tons of shades of Felicity, Friday Night Lights, Parenthood in the themes and the way that we're dealing with that stuff.
There's one scene in this movie that screamed Felicity to me from beginning to end. Don't worry, folks, we'll get to it.
Yeah, and the other huge influence that starts to become apparent from about this point on in the movie is Mike Nichols' movie The Graduate, starring Dustin Hoffman. And they even actually thank Mike Nichols in the credit of this movie because so much of this storyline going forward with the Ruth Abernathy, the mother of Bill character, is very Graduate, straight out of The Graduate. And it starts with, you know, Tom has agreed to be a pallbearer and he's already stressed out about this. Then Ruth comes to his house and he opens the door and it's Barbara Hershey looking sad and hot. So we're like, okay, all right, I can see what they're doing here. And he's trying to explain to her, like, maybe I shouldn't be a pallbearer because I didn't really know your son, but he's trying to say it in a way that is nice. So she's not getting it. And he's trying to rip the Band-Aid off. He can't do it. The next scene is one of the funniest cuts where he knocks on Scott's door. Scott opens the door and first thing Tom says is, "Now I'm giving the eulogy." And it's like, okay, he has somehow gotten himself deeper into this, that not only does he not know this guy and he's going to be a pallbearer, but now he's given the eulogy at the funeral. And he comes in and he's telling Scott, like, I don't know how this happened. You know, Ruth Abernathy is casting a spell. And then he looks around the room and he realizes all his friends are hanging out without him. And he goes, what is this, a conspiracy? Everybody needs to be a couple now or we don't get the invite? And I'm like, this is one of the most relatable things in the movie as well. So like the first half of this movie has a lot of really funny, really relatable moments that just work. And so like when he's like, everybody is here. And then Julie shows up and he's like, fucking, you guys invited Julie and you didn't call me? And by the end of this scene, everybody has decided they're coming to the funeral. And they're going to the funeral now in kind of a grotesque way because they want to see Tom struggle at the eulogy. And it's some sort of like kind of perverse thing that literally the gravity of the situation, that this guy's actually dead, hasn't really hit them. And it doesn't hit them because then we're at the funeral. And I love that Tom gets up to give the eulogy and it's a very awkward, impersonal eulogy. And some of his friends are fucking dying laughing. They are howling and they're trying to make it seem like they're upset. But Gwyneth, Julie, actually is upset. And I really liked that gives us some good insight into her, where she's like, this isn't funny. Like there was a moment where on paper, this scenario is funny, mistaken identity, but we're dealing with a real person. And that makes us like Julie a lot more because some of these friends aren't taking it seriously. But I gotta say, when we're talking about the funeral, one of the pallbearers is Kevin Corrigan, who eagle-eyed viewers might remember as Sam Weiss from Fringe. So he is one of the pallbearers. One of the other pallbearers, of course, and cousin of Bill Abernathy is Greg Grunberg. So Grunberg is here as one of the cousins. And right beside Grunberg is Zach Orth. Zach Orth, who is in one episode of Fringe, but would be on Bad Robot produced Revolution as one of the leads of the show, is sitting here as one of Bill's cousins as well. So this funeral is just loaded with Bad Robot alum because we get 3 in very minor, like blink and you miss it cameos, but those 3 guys would all work on Bad Robot shows going forward. So I thought that was a fun moment when we look back and we're like, oh, look, like we knew Grunberg was going to show up. He had to. But then we get the bonus. Kevin Corrigan and Zach Orth are both there, who would both be on Fringe in some capacity, which is kind of cool.
The moment when Tom gets the visit from the mother of the gentleman who died, and the mother basically cons him into saying the eulogy at, her son's funeral. I was screaming at the TV. I'm like, Tom, this is your moment to get the fuck out, get the fuck out, get the fuck out. But the fact that every opportunity that Tom has to get out of this predicament, he doesn't do it. In the back of my head, I'm thinking two possible reasons. Number one, he realizes what's happening to him right now, and he realizes that in a way, subconsciously, he wants to stay with his mother because it's comfortable and it's familiar. And unconsciously, he understands that he needs a change in his life. So maybe that's why he continued doing the charade of continuing to lie to this woman and saying, I know your son, when he really didn't. What do you think about that? Am I, am I sort of over analyzing this scene, or am I giving the script too much credit for what it's trying to achieve here?
No, I think you're right. I think that is why he doesn't come clean sooner. And it is just, the awkwardness of that moment and the hurt that it will inflict is too much that you casually just wouldn't want to be the guy to do that. Now, unfortunately, as we go forward, Tom does more stuff that will make this revelation like a car accident rather than ripping off a Band-Aid, right? So, like, I get why they wrote it that way, but it's just, you're watching it and you're like, oh, dude, like you had so many opportunities. But I love at the funeral, after Julie has realized how serious this is, Schwimmer's carrying out the casket and Julie starts to leave, and he fucking drags the casket over to ask Julie out for coffee. And I love that this is where the other pallbearers are like, is this dude trying to pick up chicks at a funeral? And that was one of the funniest parts where, and he is, and he almost ruins the wedding, or the wedding. He almost ruins the funeral. And there's the shot of looking up at Grunberg, Zach Orth, and Barbara Hershey, and she's like, maybe it was a mistake to get you here. But she thinks it's because he loved Bill so much that he's not ready to deal with it. And we know that that's not what it is. And she says, okay, like, it was too soon. We asked you to do too much here at the funeral. By the way, you're in the will, so drop by tomorrow. And it's like, oh my God, this guy can't get out of this.
The other thing that I was thinking about this movie, first off, I just want to say really, really quick, the fact that Tom's friends were sort of in a happy way going to this guy's funeral who they didn't know just to see Tom fuck up, and the way that his friends sort of mimed crying, but they were laughing hysterically, really, really fucking pissed me off. Like, I'm like, you immature sons of like, come on, are you kidding me? So, like you, Matt, I am happy that Julie was the only character in the funeral, in the funeral mass, as it were. It's not mass, they're Jewish, but in the funeral service, I like the fact that Julie was the only one that was particularly serious and really understood the weight of the situation. Also, if I could just go back just a little bit here, when Tom initially goes to his friend's apartment to say, I'm doing the eulogy now, and everybody is there having a party without him, that really gave me shades of Sean Blumberg from Felicity, because especially the early seasons, in the early seasons of Felicity, Sean would try and insert himself into anything that was happening in the world of Felicity, Noel, Ben, or Julie. So that moment to me was like, this is a Sean moment here, and I absolutely love it. I loved it so much.
Speaking of, you felt that was like a very Sean Blumberg kind of thing. The next thing that happens after he asks out, well, he tells Julie, like, hey, you want to get coffee sometime at the funeral? He does something that strikes me as like a very Noel-ish thing. He writes out this script before he calls, where he's got all of his like conversation kind of like planned out. and he's like rehearsed to make sure that this call goes perfect. And this felt to me like something that Noel would do, you know, to make sure that like everything worked out, because he was like a meticulous kind of planning kind of guy. And I love that this is the funniest scene with the mom, where he's like, Julie, and he's like, hi, how are you? Which is written on his script, and he checks it off as he says it. And then he's trying to hit these moments, and his mom is yelling in the background. And of course, he's like panicking because he doesn't want Julie to know that he lives at home with his mother. And then his mom does the thing that used to happen in the days before cell phones to everyone, where you're on the phone, on the call, and his mom picks up the phone. She's like, hello? 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 And then he tries to play it off, and it's so funny where he's like, Julie, did something happen? I think it was like a party line interference. I was trying to communicate with you. You couldn't hear me? I love the way he tries to play it off. It's really funny. And his mom is just like, I love his mom, and he's so mean to her, but like she does embarrass him at every turn, but it's all in like a loving way. Like she loves him so much. She just wants to be part of his life. And he really is at a point where he just doesn't want to deal with that. He's trying to shut her out. And even later, not to jump ahead, but there is a scene where like Julie comes over and his mom is home, and he's like, Mom, whatever you do, don't show any pictures, don't tell any stories. And of course she breaks out pictures, she offers food, she does everything he said not to do. And it's really charming and funny. But so he sets up the date, and she says like, you know, can it be kind of a double date? Like, so we already know that she is not kind of in the same zone as him. They're kind of on different pages. And he tells Scott, tee me up all night. Make me look good. Help me impress Julie. Make sure you don't mention that I'm unemployed, that my mom is living with me and all this stuff. And of course, Vartan fucks it up entirely, that you're like, I don't know, something's going on here. And as the movie goes on, we do find out that Scott is kind of vibing with Julie, even though he's married. And that's a little bit creepy. But I thought that this date is really funny. And at the end of the date, though, he goes in for a kiss and he ends up headbutting her. And she says, you know, you misread it. I'm not ready for this. And you seem like a perfectly nice guy, but I'm going to leave. I'm moving away. I don't know where I'm going, but I got to get out of here. I got to move on. So what are you thinking as, you know, the date doesn't go as planned, and then he finds out that his dream girl is not that into him and is planning on running away anywhere but here?
First of all, the date was the date from hell, because everything that could go wrong during the date did go wrong. Just a quick word on Michael Vartan. For him to go after a crush that he had on this girl in high school while he was married, I'm like, what the fuck is he thinking? Like what kind of man does that? It just really pissed me off. And the main reason why it pissed me off, guys, because I'm obsessed with loyalty. Anyway, I really found it heart-wrenching when Julie ends up telling Tom, after they have this whole date, that she wants to escape, that she wants to leave town, and she wants to basically flee the nest because she's got her own issues, of which we'll find out here in a moment. I felt really bad for him, because I'm like, if she goes, Tom is never going to get out of this fucking black hole of a life that he's got. Julie is his Ben in this situation. And if she goes, he's never going to fucking leave his house. He's going to die in that house with his mother. And it wouldn't surprise me if he would go Norman Bates on her at some point. Because listen, this woman, like man has said, is sweet to like the nines, but there's only so much a person can take before they snap. I just found it really, really disturbing how Michael Vartan hit on Tom's girl with him being a married man. But I also really love, in a scene that Matt is probably going to talk about just here in a few seconds, when Julie mentions to Tom that Michael Vartan put moves on her. I really love how Tom tries to play it off, and he says, he did what? And then he starts to overreact, as to say, I have no idea what you're talking about, but us as the audience member, we absolutely know what he was talking about, because he was spying on her in his fucking car that he got from this guy that he got from the dead guy that he doesn't know.
We find out he has inherited the car, so now he's got this car, and they don't mention it, but we know that's the car that Bill killed himself in, which is creepy as shit. The guy killed himself by, turning on the car in a garage and letting nature take its unnatural course. And he stalks Julie, which is also a very Felicity but creepy thing now, where he's watching her at the record store and he sees Scott come to visit her, and Scott tries to kiss her and she kind of freaks out. But then when Julie tells him about this, it's when she visits him at home and, his mom does everything wrong and, "Mom, don't say friggin'." And she's like, okay. And this moment is very Ross from Friends, where he knows what has happened and he says too much and he has to backpedal so that Julie doesn't know he was spying, because she's like, "Scott made a pass at me." And he's like, "That son of a bitch tried to kiss you?" And she goes, "I didn't say kiss." And he goes, "Well, I hear pass and I go to kiss and well, what happened? He made a pass." And she's like, "Well, he did try to kiss me." He's like, "I knew it, this son of a bitch." And like, it is a really funny, charming scene. It's very Ross Geller energy from Friends. But, so yeah, we don't like Vartan because, Toni Collette's character doesn't get a lot of screen time, but she is not presented as as Rappaport's girlfriend is, kind of this annoying nag that nobody likes. She seems like a nice, likable, relatable lady. And here Vartan is stepping out, but also trying to step out with the girl that he knows Tom is in love with. So it's like a double dirtbag. It's, screwing over your wife and screwing over your friend. So it's like, fuck you, dude. And we know Tom has had it starts off as like a terrible day because his date went bad. He doesn't get the job. And then he gets roped into helping Ruth clean out Bill's bedroom. And when they are cleaning out the bedroom, he's starting to realize, finally for the first time, Bill was a real guy. And he's looking around the room and he's seeing like a moldy sandwich and an old glass of Yoo-hoo that like Bill's mom couldn't bear it to be in there alone to clean it out. And he sees this box and she's like, he loved the Mets and it's all his baseball cards. And Tom is starting to realize like, fuck, this is a real dude who is dead. And in that moment where Ruth is so upset, he kind of holds her and it leads to, they start making out and they have grief sex. And, it's this awkward graduate. It's a graduate moment. And after it's done, he starts to realize like what he has done. And even she's like, "Oh, you're such a beautiful boy." And he's like, "Oh shit, this is a mom. This is a grieving mother, the worst pain in the world." And I kind of, took a little bit of advantage here, but, we get it because he's in such a bad place. And I thought that was really interesting. And then he gets roped into going to a pool party and Grunberg and Zach Orth show up again. And like, it's so awkward when he's at this pool party and he gets caught on the phone where he's like, "I'll get out of here. I got roped into this stupid thing." And Ruth overhears. So he's kind of on the ropes with Ruth and he's got to go and impress Julie because he's hoping that can be something more. How are you feeling as this is the moment where like Tom is kind of his lowest and the most over his head in the entire movie?
That the moment when he shows up to help out, to help out the mom of the guy who just died to clean out her son's room really, really rang true with me, because when my grandmother passed away, the woman who raised me, we waited a very, very long time to clean out her room. And my grandfather couldn't go in there. My aunt couldn't go in there. So I had to be the one to go in there first and sort of assess what was in the room and sort of figure out what we were going to keep and what we were going to take. And going in there was such a surreal experience because, like in the movie, her room was like stuck in this time bubble. When I went in a room, I really forgot for like 30 seconds that she was gone because all her stuff was still there. She had unpaid bills on her desk. She had her perfume all over the place. So seeing Tom have to deal with that from this poor schmuck who killed himself in his own car was really heartbreaking. But also, I really, really like that Tom, for the most part, has been getting shat on this whole movie. First of all, he's been roped into a situation that he doesn't know how to get out of. His friends are assholes. He's got a helicopter mom. He's got a crush on a girl who can't remember who he is half the time. So I was really happy that these two people, Tom and the mother of the guy who died, had an opportunity to get out of one another what they needed from each other at that moment. Look. It was The Graduate, but sometimes, look, I'm not gonna lie, guys. Some of the best sex that you will ever have is sex that you have during a horrible time in your life. So that really tracked with me, both from an emotional standpoint of view, because it connected to my real life, and from an entertainment point of view, with the callback to The Graduate and Tom getting roped in after sleeping with this guy's mother to go to a family barbecue that he shouldn't have been at in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's all accurate. And so him and Julie, they're supposed to be going to their art show or whatever it is, and the car breaks down, and she finds Ruth's bracelet in the car. She's like, "What's this?" And he tells her, like, "Oh, I've been helping Bill's mom through like this tough time." And him and Julie have like a good time, even though the car breaks down and whatnot. So I like that. I gotta say, musically, they use Neil Young's Harvest Moon as like the backdrop music and as like the actual song like 50 times in this movie. That it is a sweet song, but it comes into this part, it plays like 5 times in a row, sometimes without lyrics, sometimes with lyrics. And like it works because it's melancholy and it gives us that mood. But everything is coming to a head where he is trying to end this thing with Ruth. He's trying to convince Julie to stay, and he goes to Julie's birthday lunch with her parents. Now, he shows up, and the dad is like, "What the fuck? Who is this guy? What the fuck is he doing here?" And I gotta tell you, Tom is in over his head because Julie's dad is played by Mark Margolis, none other than Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul's Hector Salamanca. Now, if I show up to fucking lunch, and my girlfriend-to-be's father is this well-known gangster, I'm like, getting the fuck out of here. Forget it. It's not worth it. And so Tom tries to tell Julie, like, "You gotta stay," and he's begging her, and Ruth shows up, and this is where he rips the Band-Aid off. He's like, "I didn't even fucking know Bill. I don't know what you're talking about." And everything comes apart at this lunch, where now Julie is fucking pissed because she finds out that he slept with Bill's mom, and he's done all this dirtbag shit, and it's all in front of her parents. And then he mopes at his friend's bachelor party. And this is where he tells Michael Rappaport, like, "Don't get married. Your girlfriend's an albatross. Forget it." And like, he like in that moment kind of blows up everything. So like him and Julie are on the rocks. Him and Ruth are on the rocks. Him and his core friend group are now on the rocks. What are you thinking as all this shit goes wrong? And then we see in a really awkward scene, he has fixed the carburetor of the car, but he's testing it out by sitting in his garage with the door closed and everything in the same car that Bill killed himself in, just letting it run until Scott and his mom show up. So like, what are you thinking as he's at the lowest point and everything has blown up in his face?
Okay, guys, this is the scene that I mentioned earlier that really screamed Felicity to me, because when Tom goes to meet Julie's parents at the restaurant, there are certain things that Julie's father says to Julie before Tom makes his entrance and everything hits the fan. He goes, I don't understand this. We had a plan. There was order, right? 2 months ago, you were supposed to marry this guy, and now all of a sudden you just can't. And what Gwyneth Paltrow says as Julie gave me so many Felicity vibes of Felicity holding the panic button from her mother's keychain. I am probably putting too much into the scene and tying it too much to Felicity, but I really felt that this scene was maybe the test run for that scene in Felicity with her parents in the episode The Last Stand. I know I'm probably crazy.
I'll just say you're not crazy, because I had in my notes that lunch scene is very much like the Felicity having lunch or dinner or whatever it was with her parents and Felicity in one of those early episodes. Like, it's an identical scene up until Tom ruins it.
Right.
So you're right.
When Tom shows in, I'm really glad that he doesn't have to hide this charade anymore. But because he's told so many lies on top of so many lies throughout this movie, I really felt bad for him. And it was this moment. It was this moment in the movie where I was like, you know what? I kind of don't want Tom to end up with Julie because I think Julie, at the end of the day, was a device to sort of teach Tom to want something bigger and better out of his life. I'm not saying that they're going to get together. I'm not saying that they're not going to get together at some point, but I really think at this moment in the film, I'm like, these two people have a connection. Yes, they do. There's no doubt about that. But these two people are in very different stages of their life. Julie's going this way, and Tom is basically learning how to run for the first time without his training wheels because he has the whole mother thing. So watching him trying to say, oh, no, I'm not having an affair with this older woman. I really came here for you. I love you. And to see Julie's disappointed face and to see her run out of the restaurant, it also gave me vibes of Ben standing in his front doorway going to Felicity saying, I wrote something in your yearbook and you're the one that turned halfway around and changed your college plans. So yeah, it was a great scene that made me realize that I don't want to see these two people together, which is something really strange for me because I do think that Gwyneth Paltrow, specifically in this movie, is mint Gwyneth Paltrow. And she is so good in this movie, but because of where the two characters are, like I just said, I don't think these people should end up together.
Yeah, I think as we see in the next couple of scenes, it is more about, to grow up and move on. You sometimes need to let go of the past. And this was like a thing from his past he was kind of clinging to, and with them together, they realized that, yeah, there might have been something there, but it's not the right time. And you need to kind of let those things go to be able to move on and live your life in the right way. And so after that moment where he's sitting in the car and Scott comes to see him and, he's mad at Scott because of what happened with Julie and everything, him and Scott forgive each other and they are having a sleepover. And this scene is super charming because they're in Tom's bunk beds. And again, this just shows he's got bunk beds. The dude's 25 years old and he's sleeping on bunk beds. Okay. So he's had some stunted growth and they're chatting and his mom comes in and he snaps and he goes, I'm 25 years old, Mom. This is why I got the lock. I need to be left alone. And she goes, oh, I just wanted to know if you wanted some ice cream. And he goes, yeah, a little, we'll have some. And the way he turns on a dime right there when he's so mad at her. And then he realizes he does want ice cream is so funny. And as him and Vartan are reminiscing about grade school, they realize the thing that we have kind of always known. He goes, yeah, remember that guy who moved away? And the guy goes, what? He goes, yeah, the other Tom. And he goes, fuck, the other Tom. There was another guy named Tom Thompson who moved away, partway through. And they're like, that's the guy that they thought you were. And as a Matt, I have been in many classes with other Matts, and sometimes there's another Matt C, and you're like, fuck you. You got the same last initial, but that's how you go in grade school. They do the Matt B, Matt C, whatever. And if there was more than one, then it becomes more complicated. And so Tom realizes, I got to get in touch with the other Tom and figure this out. And so to smooth things over with Ruth, he goes and she doesn't want to see him, but the other Tom comes in and he says, this is the guy. This is the guy you remember from a kid. This is the guy you wanted to call. And there's a great moment when they leave the house and Tom are together and Schwimmer says, well, I guess this is your car. And he says, I don't need the car, man. I don't want it. I got a car. Schwimmer goes, okay, good. Because I actually put some money into this thing. So I want to keep it. I'm not giving it away. And he said, yeah, so I guess you and Bill were great friends. And the other Tom goes, no, we weren't. I knew him, I remember him, but we weren't friends, which is so devastatingly sad that we thought this is the guy who him and Bill had this great relationship. But no, Bill literally didn't really have anyone, because even the guy that is the mistaken identity guy didn't have a close relationship with him. So it inherently makes the character of Bill more sad retroactively in this moment. But then Ruth comes out and she says, before Schwimmer pulls off, basically the thesis of the movie, she said, you know what? I realize now that you got in over your head and all this shit happened and I let it happen because I needed someone. In that moment of my grief, I needed someone, and Schwimmer says, I'm realizing now I needed someone too, and that's why I let this all happen. And that sums up, like, they needed something to then move on. Then he goes to the wedding. He gives Julie the car. He tells her, I want you to have it. You go. Like, we don't need to be together. I realize now that's not right. They have a nice, sweet dance to Sheryl Crow's I Shall Believe in a very, like, WBCW kind of moment. And then we see Tom's moving out. He's moving out. He is now ready to grow up. We think that Tom is locked in his room, and his buddies are like, can you just come out? And then Tom comes up the stairs and he's like, what's going on? They're like, your mom won't come out. And it's his mom who's pouting that he's moving up and growing up. And so we get this nice moment where they pack up the car and he realizes, like I said, the last line is like, I'm ready. And everybody has gotten what they need. And even though these two aren't going to be together, everybody's moving on. And Tom's actually moving into a place that Julie's dad owns. So he's getting a good deal. And it's a nice moment where we know that even though a lot of shit has gone on, all these characters are going to be fine. They're going to be fine. And they actually got what they needed out of these weird events to now be real people in the real world.
I love that this entire movie hinges on a misunderstanding of the characters not being able to look up proper names of someone. And I'm like, did anybody think to actually find this guy instead of actually playing along with the ruse of the movie? But if they did that, the whole movie would be over. But I am really glad that David Schwimmer's Tom actually found the Tom that was this guy's friend, and he was able to give the mother of the guy who killed himself he was able to give her some sense of peace in that, look, I know I treated you like shit, but here, as a consolation prize, I brought you somebody who actually did know your son and will tell you how good of a person your son actually is. The heartbreaking thing about that is, like Matt said, when they finally say goodbye to her and they go out to the car and our Tom asked the other Tom, so did you know this guy really well? And like Matt said, he was like, no, I knew of him, but he wasn't one of my friends. And it really struck me because for someone to die without having a really strong stable, for someone to die without having a really strong stable of friends is really, it's really terrifying to me that I could go throughout my life without having those close connections that so many people have. And if I die, the only people that would mourn me is the people that raised me and the people that were a part of my family. And I'm so lucky that's not the case, but that would actually terrify me more than anything else in the world. So that final moment in the driveway was both sad, but it was both sweet. I am so happy that our Tom and Julie decided that now is not the time for them to get together and that they both needed to go their separate ways. And I'm so glad that they did. But I'm really glad that there's room in there for them to get together in the future. And I absolutely love the scene when Tom is moving out and his friends go up to his room and they knock on his door, like Matt said, and they thinking that their Tom is in there, but it turns out to be his mother. And I really like that he's only moving 10 minutes away, because a lot of people, when they move out for the first time, they go halfway across the state or they move to another country. I really like that this guy is taking steps to become an adult and become a functioning adult. But I really, really like that he keeps his sweet old mother, annoying mother in mind.
It's really sweet. It ends it on a high note. I would say, 70% of this movie really works. And there's like 30% that I think kind of shows its datedness and maybe the fact that these guys who were making this was one of their early works. It's not as fleshed out in terms of the work that they would do later, but you can see all the building blocks and the tools in the toolkit that Matt, JJ, and Jason would all use in future products. So like when you look at this, the DNA that Bad Robot and these other guys would run with, is very obvious and is there. And it is, I think an underrated movie because it doesn't have like a giant legacy other than the fact that these three powerhouses, this is where they kind of started working together. But it's a nice, sweet movie. And I'll just mention a couple other small Easter eggs is that in the special thanks of the movie, everybody thanks their parents. So, Jerry and Carol Abrams and Matt Reeves' parents are all thanked. Which is nice. But I mentioned Mike Nichols, who directed The Graduate, and this movie has so many shades of The Graduate. Ed Zwick, another filmmaker who did Searching for Bobby Fischer, Last Samurai, he's thanked in there. But also Lawrence Trilling, who would be a producer on, tons of Bad Robot stuff, Felicity, Alias, and Parenthood. So, this is a guy who directs a lot of stuff, and just as early as this, he gets a shout out. And of course, Brian Burke is in the special thanks section of this movie, which it wouldn't be an early Bad Robot thing if Berkey was left out. So that is in there as well. For all the Bad Robot fans checking that for that kind of thing.
Yeah, listen, when I finished watching this movie in preparation for this discussion, I was like, is this the most Bad Robot-y movie that we've ever covered? And I think so. Cause this, like we've said for almost an hour now, this movie is so littered with the DNA of the production company that Matt and I love from the top of our heads to the tips of our toes. It's just so amazing and so wonderful to have this hidden gem that I've never seen before. Just real quick before we wrap up, Matt, this was Reeves' directorial debut, wasn't it? Or that will come later.
Yep, nope, that's right. This is the directorial debut, and this is right before Felicity. So you got to imagine this movie is what gets them the meeting to pitch Felicity.
With that being said, as we wrap up here, Matt, do you want to tell the folks what is in store for us in the weeks to come?
So we're going to continue taking a look at some Bad Robot films. So, whether they were directly the production company or the people involved were the production company. So today, obviously, this is before Bad Robot proper. The next movie we're going to cover is a movie that I've never heard of or seen, but J.J. Abrams produced a movie that sounds kind of on paper like a That Thing You Do. Jennifer Love Hewitt, Will Ferrell in a movie called The Suburbans from 1999 that apparently J.J. is in and produced. So we're going to check that out next week. After that, we're going to jump ahead to a movie that J.J. produced a few years ago, Morning Glory with Rachel McAdams, Harrison Ford. And then we will follow up with completely shifting gears, the World War II zombie Nazi epic Overlord, which JJ also produced for Paramount a few years back.
All right, guys. So now that you have an idea of where the show's roadmap is going, I will just say if you like our content and you want to reach out to us, you can do that in a couple places. First, you can email us at radio815@aol.com, or if you're still a fan of social media, you can reach out to us at JJUniverse815 on Twitter or X or whatever you like to call it. If you want to reach out to me, you could just reach out to me on X or Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But Matt, if the good folks want to try and reach out to you, where can they do that?
We can log some movies on letterboxd.com/MDC3000.
Until next time, as I say often, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.